Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. He's Ricardo Martinez Paz. Week 2, we had some roller coaster of emotions games take place for both of these teams. But at the end of the day, both the Steelers and the Eagles still find a way to pull out the victories. So we are here to break them down, analyze what happened in both of these games, and look ahead towards week 3. So, Ricardo, 2 weeks into the NFL season, Eagles 2-0, Steelers 1-1. But how are you doing, my friend?
I'm still recovering from watching that Steelers game last night. I can only imagine how you're feeling, but both our teams have just been playing ugly, undisciplined football to start the season. I'm not feeling great about it, but I mean, we both got the win. Like you said, that's what matters the most. And definitely the biggest for the Steelers, division opponent, obviously. So still, I mean, yeah, it's been a chaotic few days in the NFL. So
Yeah, it absolutely has. And I think recovering is the perfect word choice for regarding that Steelers game yesterday. And it's like I'm trying to keep myself from not getting too ahead of myself and thinking about like the long term with, further down the road this season, just kind of keeping it, analyze what happened this week, look ahead to next week. Don't think big picture too much, especially when it's only 2 weeks in. But, man, it's hard to, when you just go through the roller coaster of emotions that last night was. And I guess we could just get right into it. We could start with the Steelers just because it's fresh in both of our minds. But I mean, man, the first thing I got to say about this game is, dude, it just looks like the offense, it looks like the offense has regressed. And now I want to preface this by saying, yes, the expectations from what happened in the preseason were outlandish. It was preseason. I was one of them that got maybe a little bit too excited about what the offense showed in the preseason. But if you were to sit here and tell me through 2 weeks of the season, they would have gone backwards to where they were. Really, it looks like where they were in the first half of last year, that they wouldn't be building off of how they closed last season. I personally would be shocked because that's what it feels like is that through 2 weeks so far, we are back to what we saw from the Steelers offense in weeks, the second half of week 4 when Kenny Pickett made his debut, week 4 through week 7, 8. I don't remember when their bye week was last year, but it feels like we're back in that time period. We're back in this team not being able to move the football. We're back in poor play calling from Matt Canada. We're back in the team not seeming to have an identity or not really wanting to embrace their identity. And it's just leading to awful offensive production.
yeah, I mean, oh man, it's a culmination of things, really. I mean, yeah, you kind of touched on all of those points, and I mean, even in the stands, like the fans were chanting for Matt Canada to be fired, and I mean, we've talked about that for a bit. And it's been talked about for a while now. Like that's nothing new, really. But yeah, certainly the play calling wasn't exactly great. I'm going to say this that I mean I know you're going to touch on this, but the offensive line I feel like also has just taken a huge step backward. I mean, we were texting about this last night. This offensive line on paper at least looks like it was going to be a better unit than last year. And I said this yesterday too. It looks like it's just gone backwards. It just looks they don't look like they're playing together as a unit. They're just a lot. I mean, there's some free rushers on the last 2 weeks. I mean, failing to pick up certain blitzes and miscommunication across the line. And just overall, they couldn't even protect Kenny Pickett. They couldn't run the ball at all. I mean, sure, the Browns defense, their front four is pretty formidable. I mean, you got Myles Garrett there, but and a few other Dalvin Tomlinson and a few other notable names across that line. But still, that should be your bread and butter. I mean, that was what the offensive line strength was last year. It was run blocking, and they couldn't even do that. So that's very alarming to see, and it's just across the board, across the entire line. It just everyone seems to struggle. There's no cohesiveness at all. I don't think, and I don't know really what's going on with that. that's a huge issue.
Well,
I mean, Kenny Pickett also was under pressure a lot. He was definitely uncomfortable several times throughout the game, and So no clean pocket, no run game. That usually doesn't make out to be a good game, really. So,
well, let me address the first thing you said there about Matt Canada and the fans chanting "Fire Canada" during the game. This is just a PSA to all fans out there. Matt Canada is not getting fired this season. And I'm not going to go through the whole song and dance that we did all last year of how long is Matt Canada going to keep his job? When are the Steelers going to move on from him? How is this going to affect Kenny Pickett's development? All of this is valid questions, but I'm not going through this in week 2 of the regular season. I'm not going to do this week in and week out for the full 17-game slate because the Steelers aren't going to move on from him. It's not something that they do. They have him under contract for the remainder of this year. They're going to roll with it. They're probably going to think in their mindset that it's going to hurt Kenny Pickett's development more for him to all of a sudden have an offensive coordinator change halfway through the season than it is to just roll with Canada in the offense that he knows for the rest of this year. So any Steelers fans out there that are thinking they'll be able to fire Matt Canada, and there's anybody on their current offensive coaching staff who can step in and magically call plays that are going to all of a sudden manufacture, better offensive production. I think that's just foolish. That's something that's just not going to happen. We can have the Matt Canada conversation at the end of the season when the full schedule has been played out and we know how the Steelers season ultimately ended. But right now it's foolish to be chanting "Fire Canada" because that's something that's not going to happen in week 2. And I honestly don't see it happening at any point during this regular season. So that's first and foremost with Matt Canada. But then you get into the point about the offensive line, man, and it's extremely disappointing. I mean, the fact that what you talked about, it feels like there's no cohesion. It's like this unit, minus Isaac Seumalo, which, is an upgrade over Kevin Dotson. This is the same unit that played the whole season, all 17 games together last year. And now we're sitting here and it looks like these guys have all never played with each other on the offensive line before. I mean, forget about pass protection where they're struggling. Even running the football, they're seeming to have, struggles getting any push whatsoever, opening up any holes for Najee Harris. So, I mean, it's extremely disheartening. And this is, again, what I'm saying. It feels like the offense is regressing, where everything that they built up in the second half of last year with the offensive line really finding that identity and running the football, it just feels like it's out the window at this point, and it's back to square one where we were, last season at this time.
Yeah, and I mean, just to touch on the rushing game. I mean, the longest run was Najee Harris's 21-yard rush, but you take that away, they only had 34 rushing yards on 20 attempts. So that's not going to cut it. The offense is predicated. It's the run game's a huge part of it, and it just wasn't there yesterday. It wasn't there the week before. So it's quite concerning to start off.
And I don't want to sound like I'm defending Matt Canada either, but again, it's just too early to know, and there's too many other things that are going wrong on this offense. It's not like you can point your finger at one thing because it's the O-line like we talked about. I mean, even Kenny Pickett last night, like you take away that one throw and catch with George Pickens that went for, I think it was like a 75-yard touchdown. I mean, he would have only thrown for around, 150 yards. So it's not like it would have been anything special. And he had a lot of bad throws again yesterday. There were a couple of other throws to George Pickens where the timing just seemed off. There was the throw to start. I think his first, he had the interception on the first drive, which was really a bad pick. And then also his first throw to start the second half should have been an interception, frankly. I mean, it's like just throw the ball away there. So it's just bad decision-making. Something just seems off with Kenny Pickett where when it comes down to his decision-making and his accuracy, he's just not where he got to at the end of last year where the Steelers were finding success. So, really, there's just a lot of bad on this offense. Ricardo, I have a wild stat for you that I read this morning that I had to go and double check it myself and do the math on it to confirm it was correct. The Steelers were down 3 points at the start of the third quarter. Obviously, we know they got the go-ahead touchdown thanks to the TJ Watt defensive touchdown. Yeah. But the Steelers won that game going into the third quarter down 3. And they had -7 yards of offense on their 3 drives in the fourth quarter.
Jeez.
So, like, I was reading it. That's never happened in pro football before, where a team has come from behind in the fourth quarter to start the fourth quarter after having negative offensive yards in that quarter. So, I mean, it just shows you, like, we're not overblowing this. This is as bad as the offense has really looked in the in the in the season in 2 games that Kenny Pickett has been the starting quarterback.
Yeah, and just overall, they went four for 14 on third down. I mean, a lot of them were third and longs. I mean, I think at one point the average was like 8 yards or longer, 8.8 yards on third down, which is you're not going to be successful doing that. If you can't run the football, you can't even get a few yards, and you're always going to be in third and long situations. So, and they only had 9 first downs the entire game, which is crazy. So
Yeah.
that's alarming.
Dude, it's tough times right now. It's tough times. I'm very interested to see Mike Tomlin's press conference. Usually he does them on Tuesday since it was a Monday night game. I don't know
Yeah.
if he's going to be doing it tomorrow, but I'm
Mhm.
curious what he says on this offense and how he sees it improving. So I really got to sink my teeth into that. Obviously it's kind of like a day behind because it's the Monday night game with kind of reading up on anything. But let me touch on the defense a little bit because there was a lot of good. And there was also some bad. I mean, let's start with the good. TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith both had huge games. They combined for 11 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 6 quarterback hits, and 2 touchdowns. So obviously Alex Highsmith with the pick 6 on the first play of the game. And from scrimmage, and TJ Watt with the go-ahead scoop and score. I mean, if it wasn't for the effort of these 2 guys, the Steelers just frankly would not have won. I don't know what more I can say about how good these guys are. I mean, you could make I think we talked, the Steelers and Eagles arguably have the 2 best edge rushing position groups in the NFL, and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith put that on display last night. Marcus Golden also getting a sack as well.
Yeah, I mean, this defense came through. I mean, like on quite a few occasions. I mean, they had 6 sacks overall. They had the pick 6. They forced 3 fumbles, and yet
Four turnovers total. I mean, they won the turnover battle, which was huge.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, they still. I mean, they could have added more points, but still, that's promising at least to see that the defense is creating turnovers and making crucial stops when they matter, and then. I mean, at the end of the game, there was Elijah Riley's sack on 3rd and 7 that made it a 4th down, and then Joey Porter Jr. in the coverage on that last play. And so, yeah, I mean, they stepped up when they had to, for sure. Like you said, it wasn't all pretty, which I know you're going to talk about, but still, I mean, their biggest players, their stars came to play and made the plays when they mattered.
They did. And, that's almost provides me a little bit of hope where it's like, if the Steelers defense, it sounds like Minkah Fitzpatrick it's not that serious injury, even though he did have to go to the hospital during the game. Like if they can manufacture turnovers, that's a way that this offense, until they can kind of right the ship, and I'm hoping get back to where they were at the back half of last year. If they can capitalize on good field position and turnovers, that could be big. But when it comes to the bad, which you alluded to, the interior defensive line can't stop the run, man. Through 2 weeks, they are worst against the run in the entire NFL. Nick Chubb looked like he was about to go for 200 yards on the ground before that, season-ending unfortunate injury.
Yeah.
Hope everything, as far as his career goes, hopefully he can come back from this. Just devastating to see. But outside of that, Jerome Ford also had 106 yards on 16 carries. So, I mean, if that injury doesn't happen to Nick Chubb, he was bound for a big day, and the Steelers were probably going to lose that game. So, I don't know what more has to be done. I don't know what they really can do differently other than just kind of, this is going to sound awful, but just, I don't know if they can scheme it differently or do what, but I don't really see them getting better against the run, Ricardo. I really don't. And I think it's going to come down to, for them to have success on defense, they're going to just have to, kind of bend but don't break and capitalize on opportunities you have to create turnovers. I mean, they should have had a 5th turnover yesterday, but Levi Wallace dropped that interception in the end zone. But, I mean, I think really bend but don't break and, hold teams when they get down near the red zone and manufacture turnovers if you can in the middle of the field. I don't see how this unit gets better against the run as currently constructed.
Yeah, I don't know if they need to have more five-man fronts, more players in the box. I mean, you also don't want to make it too obvious that you're playing against the run to stop the run. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely going to be a really tough challenge. I mean, losing Cam Hayward is obviously we knew it was going to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
And even with him, it still wasn't great, but without him there, it's definitely it's going to be way more difficult to stop the run. And then, I mean, next week they face Josh Jacobs, who I know hasn't really been running well, and we're going to get into that, but still, there are all these running backs that the Steelers are facing in the coming weeks that they're going to have a tough time playing against. So they got to figure it out. They got to figure out how to minimize it at least. I don't know how else
Yeah.
to put that.
That's what
Minimize
I'm saying. Minimize it, contain it, just find some way to not let these offenses continue to just gash you on the ground. But
yeah.
we'll talk more about that when we preview the Raiders matchup. One last thing I just want to say, there's a lot of bad on offense. There's some bad on defense. I'm going to talk about special teams a little bit later. But the one kind of thought that kind of gives me a little bit of hope, this is the type of game the Steelers lost early last year in the first half of the season. Think back to the Patriots in week 2 last year, the Jets in week 4 last year, the Dolphins, they losing by 6 points on the road in week 7 last year. Mike Tomlin said it after the game. We aren't going to apologize for winning. You take that win that goes into the win column because, no one can take those away from you once that W is on the schedule. So, sit here at 1-1, take the win, and the Steelers find a way to just grit out a victory against a division rival. At the end of the day, you still have to kind of look at that as a positive. So, take that victory and get ready for the Raiders next week. So, that's where things are through week 2 for the Steelers. Let's get into this Eagles game as they were able to come away with the victory against the Vikings all the way back on Thursday Night Football. It feels like it was so long ago, but I'm glad I wrote down my notes after the game, so I have some recollection of everything that I really wanted to touch on. But you take the lead here. I guess what's one of your big takeaways to start?
I mean, the biggest one has to be the run game. That was huge overall. I mean, 259 rushing yards on 48 carries, 5.4 yards per carry. DeAndre Swift had a career night. I mean, 175 rushing yards. He had that one long one, 40 plus yards. Might have been longer than that, and he had his first touchdown as an Eagle. So, kind of just going back to the fundamentals, the basics, as I said, going back to running the football. And I mean, Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, was running a lot of 3-man fronts, kind of, playing to protect against the pass and then preventing the deep ball. So, I mean, I give credit to Brian Johnson, our offensive coordinator, for at least sticking with the run there and just kind of pounding away, hammering the defensive line the entire night. So, I mean, it's kind of what I've been saying too, is if it ain't broke, don't fix it, just keep going with it. If they're not going to stop it, then just keep going. And they did. And I mean, they punished them for it. The time of possession, I think, was a 20-minute difference. And still this game somehow ended up close in the end. But, it kind of reminds me a bit of 2 seasons ago when, Jalen Hurts was full-time starter for the first year. They were kind of going back to running the football and really making it, when the passing game was struggling, as it was on Thursday too, just went back to running the football, a lot of zones, power schemes, designed runs and all those things. So it reminded me a bit of that, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because then the offense wasn't, all that good. It was Jalen Hurts still was kind of developing and, I guess it also reminded me of exactly the point I just said of the passing game struggling. The play calling again was a bit questionable. I'm kind of transitioning, but
I want to ask you real first on something about the run game specifically. I just looked this up real quick while you were talking about this. This was the most amount of rushing yards DeAndre Swift has ever had in a single game in his career. Yep. So I guess kind of the question I want to ask you is, should the Eagles, are you in favor if they were to say, hey, we're going to really lean into our run game? That's going to kind of be our identity going forward, kind of moving off of sort of where they were last year. How would you feel about that? And does this kind of change things? It was Kenny Gainwell week 1. It was DeAndre Swift week 2. Obviously, I mean, I think DeAndre Swift showed everybody something in this game.
Yeah.
How does that running back room kind of shake out now if everybody's healthy?
I mean, I would probably, I said last week I could see Kenny Gainwell as the running back one, but after this performance, it seemed like DeAndre Swift was a bit more confident, a bit more. I mean, he was always a lead back. I mean, so we kind of saw that on Thursday night. So I think the way it shakes out, at least for the next few weeks, probably, I'd say DeAndre Swift is a lead back and Kenneth Gainwell is probably a third down back, more pass catching. I mean, you can rotate him in every now and then just to take Swift out for some rest. And I mean, Rashad Penny will probably go back to being a healthy scratch like he was week one, and Boston Scott will get a few carries, a few snaps here and there. But I think it should be DeAndre Swift leading and you just kind of hope that he stays healthy, and which is kind of where the rotation comes in. You want to keep him fresh, even if you did run him like crazy, like 28 times this past. I mean, it worked, and so
that was just more out of necessity
yeah,
too.
exactly, because we lost Boston Scott in that game too to a concussion, and Rashad Penny had to come in. So yeah, I mean, I would say Swift probably our lead back, and then Kenneth Gainwell second, and Boston Scott following him. So
yeah, okay, all valid. So I'll let you transition into that next point that you had there, that you were kind of going to. Yeah.
Yeah, I just again I'm still a bit iffy on the passing game, and again Jalen Hurts doesn't look all that. He didn't look all that comfortable on Thursday, and I know the Eagles said this, or I think it was Jason Kelsey, Nick Sirianni both said that the defenses have been throwing, very exotic looks at them, but at some point you got to figure that out. You can't just keep saying that and not have a plan for it. Like you're supposed to game plan around that. You're supposed to be prepared for it, like as much as possible. I mean, I in the passing again, pass blocking again, it seemed like they struggled. The offensive line did, and in protection, Hurts got sacked, I believe, like 4 times, something like that. Mailata let up 3 of those sacks, which is also kind of discouraging. He's been very inconsistent. Mailata I'm talking about, but on his day, he doesn't allow anyone to get play. He's a brick wall. Like he's really good, but I mean Thursday night he struggled. The offensive line struggled in pass protection. So, and again, it just seems like Jalen Hurts is a bit indecisive and really not. I'm not going to say not making his reads, but it's just pass protection not holding up, play calling not exactly being all that good. And then there's one specific one. I think it was 3rd and 6. It was later in the game, and they call a quarterback draw, and it just got totally blown up. I don't really know why that was even the play call to begin with. But I couldn't nitpick at some of these play calls, but really it's just I think Brian Johnson's still trying to find his footing. But again, the issue there's this issue that last week it was Dallas Goedert who didn't get a single target, or sorry, he didn't get a single catch. And this week it was AJ Brown. I mean, we saw how animated he was on the sideline talking to, well, I guess kind of in Jalen Hurts' face, and Hurts being the calm demeanor guy he is, kind of just like, that's just how it is. Like, just going with the run game, that's what's working. Kind of showing that leadership quality there, but still, like, you gotta figure out how to get your best players involved. AJ Brown, he could have scored in the end, but I think he had 3 targets after that heated discussion with Jalen Hurts too. So again, you just got to figure out how to get everyone involved. Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert, you got to get them all their catches, their receptions. They're all really good players. And especially when Quez Watkins went out injured, he had the hamstring injury. That I feel like put more on Brian Johnson to at least target them, or like spread it out a little more amongst the 3 of them, the biggest playmakers. So, and again, yeah, you can say that the run game, like, you didn't have to. It was the run game that was dominant, but still, like, it's just got to be a better job overall and getting your best players involved.
Yeah. It's interesting because the old mantra is like the diva wide receiver. And I don't think that's where this applies to. And I feel like Nick Sirianni has already kind of shut down the idea that this is affecting the Eagles in any sort of way. Like he said, it's not. It's more just, it's frustration. And you're
Yeah.
right. And I think, I know you're going to get to the defense in a second here, but I think just like a lot of this is the growing pains of you didn't have any starters playing in the preseason with two new offensive coordinators. So there's two new coordinators, one of them obviously being the offensive coordinator. So there's just an adjustment period where it's an adjustment period for Jalen Hurts in the new system and getting used to kind of the new scheme and play calling and how they're going to go about attacking defenses. And it's also kind of an adjustment period for, also getting the ball schematically to all these playmakers. So I think once that adjustment period can hopefully kind of, the Eagles can get over that hump. I don't know if that takes 2 weeks. I don't know if that takes 4 weeks. I don't know if that takes the first half of the season.
Yeah.
But hopefully once they can get past that, then you'll start to see Jalen Hurts get back to where he was last year. You'll see all these playmakers getting involved, like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith with the big game, Dallas Goedert not being, an afterthought in week one. So that's kind of where I chalk it up to more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a part of it. At least not having them play in preseason, but I mean I hope they figure that out like sooner rather than later because they face. I mean, the Commanders are apparently not a joke after that huge comeback they
No,
had.
I don't think they're a joke at all. I don't think
Yeah,
they're a joke at all.
that's not going to be easy. Then you play the Jets. Then you play like the meat of your schedule, the toughest part of your schedule. So you got to figure it out soon. You're going to be playing better opponents, and I mean, I'm not going to say the Bucks are pushed over either, but
No,
it's
and the other thing, we talked about this at the start of the season. The Eagles need to take advantage of the first half of their schedule because the next, 5 games after the bye are brutal. So they need to rack up the wins here, and especially with how good Dallas has looked, they're not going to be able to cruise to a division title, which is 5 losses.
Exactly, yeah. So they got to figure it out soon. At time, I'm not going to say I'm going to fully. I'm a little worried, but I'm somewhat optimistic that they can figure it out before they get to the brutal part of their schedule. But and maybe hopefully that bye week can help them. Who knows? But yeah, I guess I'll transition over to the defense, which was kind of the more positive note in this game.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, I will say that they did come up with some big plays too. And I guess the Eagles were pretty fortunate that the Vikings fumbled as many times as they did, which was 4 times. I mean, the Eagles forced a fumble on special teams, which, I mean, if they hadn't done that, that was going to lead to at least a field goal because the Vikings were down inside the 30. The punt coverage was terrible, but got bailed out there. Alexander Madison fumbled on the second play of the next drive, and the Eagles couldn't capitalize. Then Justin Jefferson fumbled too while he's trying to reach over the pylon. And again, when we scored the next drive going into the half, it was 13-7. So we got lucky there. Otherwise, the Vikings would have taken the lead. Then Josh Sweat right out of this coming out of the second half with the strip sack and Fletcher Cox recovering that. And Jalen Hurts punched it in 2 plays later, making 27 and kind of really put it out of reach almost. But I mean, there was constant pressure the entire night against Kirk Cousins. I mean, Jordan Davis had a pretty good game. I mean, there was there were 2 plays that stood out to me. One for there was a tackle for a loss where he just completely shoved the offensive lineman straight back into Kirk Cousins and the running back, and so that was encouraging to see. Granted, the Vikings were down 3 starters at that point, but and then Jalen Carter, I mean, he had a couple notable plays too. A tackle for a loss that's pretty big. So, again, it's encouraging to see the defensive line is playing fairly well. And then, again, the rushing attack, kind of like last week when they were playing against Patriots, it was non-existent. I guess credit to Sean Desai there. I'm definitely more encouraged by Desai than I am with Brian Johnson. And considering the injuries that the Eagles had on defense, and they lost Avonte Maddox in the game, who's now out for the season, which, I mean, that just never stays healthy. That's unfortunate. But and a couple of, and they were already without Reed Blankenship. N'Kobe
Well,
Dean was
I
out.
was going to ask you this. Yes, and James Bradbury wasn't healthy as
Yeah,
well. So,
exactly.
I mean, so here's my question for you because I agree. I think what you've seen so far of the defensive line is really promising, but Kirk Cousins and this Vikings passing attack carving up the secondary for 346 yards through the air and 4 passing touchdowns. I mean,
Yeah.
does that concern you at all, or are you just more like, hey, this was 50% of the people in our secondary were, second string players that were filling in for injuries? Is that more what you chalk it up to? Or is there any concern with you of, this Eagles secondary when you go up against, top wide receivers like Justin Jefferson and, obviously the air attack that ensued from there and TJ Hawkinson having a big day without N'Kobe Dean there?
I mean, I said this that TJ Hawkinson was probably going to have a big game because our linebackers and safeties aren't that good. It was a mismatch. So that I wasn't surprised about necessarily. It definitely could have been better, at least defended. But yeah, I would say I'm slightly worried. I mean, and yeah, definitely a part of it was James Bradbury being out because this is what I said. If Justin Jefferson isn't going against Darius Slay, he's going against someone on the opposite side of the field, Josh Jobe, or I mean, whoever. I can't. Was it Mario Goodrich? I think it was at times. So I'm not surprised that Jefferson did as well as he did because he was lining up, on the opposite side of the field as Darius Slay. So it's still a little concerning. Mac Jones carved him up last week too, but um, man, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I am worried, but part of it is yes, the injuries and the weak linebacker room we have, which is going to be a constant issue the entire season, unless we bring someone else in who I really don't know who we would at this point. It's still way too early for that anyway, but yeah, it's kind of a bit of both, I would say. But I think this side's doing enough with the players he's had, considering the injuries that have already, been more. There have already been more injuries than last year. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, that's valid. That's very valid. So, I mean, definitely something to just continue to keep an eye on is how both of these new coordinators continue to kind of go about, gelling more with their, respective sides of the football. Um,
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about from this game before we get into stock up, stock down?
Um, Boston Scott. I think I touched on all the injuries. Yeah, Avonte Maddox out. Boston Scott concussion protocol. Quez Watkins hamstring injury. He probably will be out at least the next game. That's about it. Those are the biggest takeaways for me.
Yeah, Maddox is definitely the big one there. But
Yeah.
let's get into stock up, stock down. I'll go first with the Steelers. So I'll start with stock up. I referenced the special teams earlier, and Presley Harvin, man,
Yeah.
like, I texted you this during the Steelers game. The Steelers don't win that game without Presley Harvin's effort there. I mean,
Yes.
yes, did the defense play, well? Did TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith really take advantage of, every opportunity they had? Yes. But, a big part of why the Steelers were able to survive the Browns, rushing attack is because the Browns had to go the whole distance of the field every single time they seemed to get the ball. So he had 7 punts, 4 of which were inside the 20. He
Yep.
pinned a couple inside the 5. One, I think, bounced out of bounds, like right at the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
And he had an average of 45.7 yards per punt. So, he just needs to get a lot of kudos because, he's been somebody that's, every training camp so far, it's felt like he's had to compete for his job. And, credit to him that he's been able to, kind of be resilient and has the big game yesterday. Don't win without him. So he is one of my stock ups. My other stock up, Quan Alexander.
Yes. Give him some
Yeah,
love.
yes, get some love, man. I mean, brought him in towards the end of training camp. And he, led the team in total tackles with 9 yesterday.
Yeah.
The Steelers in general had, a decent amount of missed tackles on defense that I was pretty, not upset about, but something that definitely it was just sloppy tackling, but not from Quan Alexander. He was very on top of it. He played 60% of the defensive snaps, more than a Landon Roberts. I think that Cole Holcomb played 69% of the snaps. So he was right up there. He was disruptive, man. And he plays with an edge, dude. He's got a chip on his shoulder when he plays.
Yeah, he does.
and definitely taking on a big role in the Steelers linebacking unit.
Yeah, he's got 18 tackles now in 2 games. I think he had 9 tackles last week too. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you gave him his credit this time around because last week I had him on my stock up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's always been like a pretty good player.
Yeah.
So now credit to him, and you pretty much said all of what was needed, really.
Yeah. So those are my stock ups, and then some guys that are on the stock down list. Dude, Dan Moore Jr. is brutal. Pass
Yeah,
protection.
had to
It's
be.
brutal, man. I mean, yesterday not even like rewatching or replays, just straight up watching the game, like
Yeah,
the play unfold on its own. I mean, he's getting beaten off the snap. We're talking less than a second and a half, and the guy that he's blocking in pass protection is getting on Kenny Pickett. I mean, granted, some of the time there it was Myles Garrett, who is a top 10 defensive end in the NFL, but I mean, still, dude, he's not giving Pickett a chance on some of these plays, and he joins my stock down list.
yeah.
We're getting to the point here where if the Steelers were to make a change this week, I mean, I know they're going up against Max Crosby and Tyree Wilson, the first round rookie, to a solid edge rush tandem. I honestly don't know what Tyree Wilson's done so far his rookie season, but Max Crosby, a dominant force nonetheless. I know it's a tough matchup, but if the Steelers made the move to Broderick Jones this week, I wouldn't bat an eye at it. And I definitely think it's something that's coming maybe as soon as, I mean, we may see it before the bye week. I mean, the Steelers have an early bye week 6. I wouldn't be surprised if Broderick Jones gets his first career start before that bye week in one of these games if Dan Moore Jr. continues to struggle like this.
Yeah, there were a couple of plays where I was watching the offensive line and Dan Moore Jr. got absolutely bull rushed on a couple of them. Oh my! I was like, he got moved back so easily. Like
Yeah.
that was tough to watch. I'm like, at least like give him a tight end to help chip or something. This man's getting absolutely destroyed out here by
Yeah,
whoever
man.
was rushing.
It hasn't looked good. I mean, people that are covering the team, beat writers covering the team, thought that he was going to kind of progress a bit and that he looked good in the preseason and training camp, but it has been brutal to start the year. Last week, I think I brought up on the broadcast, he was the worst rated. I actually don't know if this came out, but I read it, worst rated offensive tackle out of the 75 that PFF graded. And he was dead last in his pass protection grade. So I would be shocked if it wasn't just as bad for the week 2 games. And then my other stock down, man, I got to give it again for the second week in a row to Kenny Pickett, dude. I talked about it, man. It's just like there was like 4 missed throws that he just seemed off on the timing, and his accuracy, which is supposed to be, what he relies on, his accuracy just seems off. He had the bad interception, man. It's just not where it was the second half of last year. And I mean, I ask you this, Ricardo. I don't want to freak out yet because it's 2 games and he could definitely right the ship and get back to where he was to close out the year. But we were expecting him to progress in this offense a little bit. And I mean, at what point can we safely say that we're not going to see, the second year jump out of him that you talk about with quarterbacks? You talk about quarterbacks kind of going from, that rookie season developing period into all of a sudden jumping in the second year, kind of like the way Jalen Hurts did last year. I mean, when is it safe to say we're not going to see that this year from Kenny Pickett? I don't want to maybe overreact too much and jump the gun on that.
I mean, I probably, man, that is tough. I mean, he's faced some pretty good defensive fronts the last 2 weeks, so I'll cut him some slack. And the offensive line has also been kind of struggling a bit with that. So, I mean, I'm not going to say the Raiders are that much. Well, they're not as good like defensive line. Obviously, their edge rushers are pretty good, but I would give it a few more weeks. I'd say probably until the bye week, and if he hasn't figured it out or the offense hasn't figured it out, then I'd be worried. Then I'd be. I mean, yeah. I don't. I'm not going to say bench him, but like.
No, absolutely, yeah, no question that.
But still, if he doesn't have it figured out by the bye week, and as you said, it's an early one. I think week 6 it is, but you
And I
know,
mean, by the bye week, man, I don't even need him to necessarily be a star. I just want in these next 3 games, can we get the offense back to where it was to close
yeah,
out last season? Like, that's all I'm asking for right now.
yeah,
Gain a yard in the fourth quarter of a football game against your division rival. A yard. I mean, minus 7 yards on offense in the fourth quarter yesterday. I
yeah,
mean, it's frustrating, and again, maybe I shouldn't have posed that question that way, because really, before we can even talk about Kenny Pickett, taking the jump in year 2, this offense just has to right the ship back to what it was to close out the season last year.
yeah, exactly. It's got to be the entire offensive unit.
Yeah.
It can't just be Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, and that's Pickett, that's the run game, that's the O-line and pass protection, that's
Mhm.
Matt Canada's play calling, that's getting Pat Fryermuth more than one target. It's
Yeah,
everything. So
yeah, exactly.
that's where we stand on the Steelers stock up, stock down. Let's transition to the Eagles now.
Yeah. So for my stock up, I mean, obviously it has to be DeAndre Swift after the game he had. I mean, 175 rush yards on 28 carries, 6.3 yards per carry, rushing TD. I mean, it was a career night for him. I don't really think I have to say much more. I'll give credit to the offensive line because they absolutely gashed them. The Vikings defensive line. They opened up a lot of holes. I mean, we could have run through them for crying out loud. It was that they were that big, those holes. But yeah, for sure, DeAndre Swift. And I guess my other one really is Jordan Davis, who is showing promise as a pass rusher, which is actually, I mean, right now he's exceeding my expectations because I wasn't expecting to have 1.5 sacks. I mean, he had a half sack last week. He had a really nice swim move on a QB hit on Kirk Cousins. I don't remember what quarter it was, but I was like, man, I didn't know he could do that. I didn't know he was quick with his hands like that. I'm like, so clearly he's developing as a passer. He's not just a run stuffer now. And he's always been good at that. And that's probably part of the reason that the two offenses that the Eagles have faced have struggled. Jordan Davis is a big part of it. He's the anchor. He's really the guy
Yeah.
who's up there, being really disruptive, with being the big guy he is. So
I mean, you know me. I talked, even when the Steelers or the Eagles drafted Jalen Carter, I said Jordan Davis was a first round pick. He's got to step up himself as well, and he's had a good start to the season. And yeah, I'm glad you gave him that stock up. One other person I just wanted to ask about. Again, like I didn't give a stock up to TJ Watt or Alex Highsmith because their stock was already up. It wasn't going to go.
Yeah.
Was that kind of a similar boat for Devontae Smith because he had, the huge game with the touchdown and going for over 100 yards?
Yeah, it was pretty much the similar thing. I mean, these two guys, I mean, I feel like they don't really get all that much attention. Devontae Smith, we knew is probably gonna have a big year again. So
Yeah.
I'm not all that surprised.
I was talking with some buddies I was watching that Thursday night football game with. I told them this before the game started, before it kicked off. One of them had a prop bet on like an anytime touchdown for AJ Brown. And I think I actually took like an alternate line on Devontae Smith's receiving yards.
Yeah.
And I told them, I was like, guys, like Devontae Smith is the real deal. Like, I think you're really going to see him kind of jump into that upper echelon of wide receivers. And I think when we even did that, kind of stat prediction episode where we talked about like the over-unders, I took the over on Devontae Smith's receiving yards. I think he's in line for a big year this season.
Yeah, he's already had two pretty good games to start, so I only expect that to continue, really.
Absolutely.
And
how
then
about your stock down?
Yeah, stock down. I mean, Jordan Mailata was one of them. I said, he allowed 3 sacks, and like I said, kind of been the most inconsistent offensive lineman the Eagles have had, at least dating back to last season. And like I said, on his best days, no one's getting past him. But on days like this, or on nights like this, sometimes he just isn't there. He just doesn't play well, and like I said, allowed the 3 sacks. I mean, he's always great against the run. I'll say that. I'll give him credit there. Just sometimes in pass protection where he falters a little bit. Hopefully Jeff Stoutland can, and can help, make him a bit more consistent on that front, the pass protection front. Then my other one, I'm going to kind of make this into one, the Jalen Hurts, Brian Johnson, because I'll throw Sirianni in there too, because the offense, again, passing wise, as I talked about before, has been, there's just a lack of creativity, a lack of explosion, really. That it's just a shell of itself. Jalen Hurts is a shell of himself too. So they've just got to figure out how to. I mean, again, like the exotic blitzes, you can't keep saying that every week. You got to figure that out. You got to figure out how to, and at least like even when you do see those kinds of blitzes, at least have some sort of like hot route, have some running back out, like peel out, or a receiver also, kind of just go in the flat, something like that, some quick pass to get it out of Jalen Hurts' hand. Because there were a few times in that game where he held on to it too long. He definitely could have thrown the ball away on a couple occasions instead of taking sacks. But, again, growing pains, but certainly a stock down for me. And I hope they do figure that out at some point.
I think it's a perfectly valid stock down to have at this point, given kind of what you've seen so far in 2 weeks from the kind of Jalen Hurts, Johnson tandem. So, yeah, certainly valid. All right, let's close out the episode with our last segment here and preview week 3. I'll start with the Steelers again, and obviously quick turnaround. I haven't had a ton of time to really dive into kind of analyzing kind of what I'm looking for as they're going up against the Ravens Sunday, or the Raiders Sunday Night Football. But the one thing that I kind of pulled so far, I guess I have my eye on right now, is it's got to be for the Steelers offensive attack. Like I need to see them get back to that identity they had to close out the season. I'm going to sound a broken record here. Run the football, really like that. That's got to be where the bread and butter starts from. And that's really, more than anybody else, more than the play calling, more than, Najee Harris or Jalen Warren. It's on the offensive line. They're the guys that got to create the holes up front. And, granted, that Browns defense is really talented. I think the Browns defense could be a top 10 unit when it's all said and done this season. They're a good unit, but no excuses, man. The Raiders, so far it's only 2 games, but they're the 6th worst team against the run so far. Yeah. They have some turnover on the defensive line, especially on the interior. Like, this is the game for the Steelers rushing attack to really get back to what, it's bread and butter. So that's kind of the first thing I view kind of going into this game. Then when I flip it on the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of the same thing. The Steelers got to find a way to stop the run. They're going up against Josh Jacobs, super talented running back. But, the Raiders O-line is less than stellar. So this is a game where I can't have Josh Jacobs going for, 120, 150 yards. Like you got to hold him under that. Again, it's like we talked about. You got to manage it. You got to contain it. I'm not saying hold him under 60 yards, but like you got to keep him from having a big day and going off for, 150 yards on the ground, because that's going to really hurt the Steelers in this one. And, one thing specifically I'll say, I wouldn't be opposed. The Steelers got to find a way to stop the run. They only played with 52 guys on their roster last night, so they only had 4 scratches, because I don't think they ever called anyone up for the Cam Hayward IR situation.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to them adding Braden Fehoko to this active roster and scratching someone like Isaiah Loudermilk or Armon Watts and getting Fehoko some snaps in there, because you're struggling to stop the run, and this is a guy that can plug holes. I really don't see what the harm would be. I mean, you really haven't seen anything from Isaiah Loudermilk that's made you think he needs to get snaps on the field. Armon Watts is a nice player. He's not a game changer. When you struggle this badly against the run, get the defensive tackle, get the nose tackle in there who can line up in, the one tech, the zero tech, and just plug holes. So that's something that I wouldn't be opposed to seeing the Steelers do to try and contain the run in this game.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I didn't even think about that. That definitely would make sense. It's a logical move. And I mean, Josh Jacobs hasn't really done much so far. He's only had
he hasn't, but he's capable of it. He's
capable of having a good
game.
But that also, kind of speaks towards the offense, like the play calling, their scheme, and with Jimmy Garoppolo under center now, I feel like they're a bit more reliant on the pass than they are on the run, which, I mean, that's to their own discretion. That's their own argument to have. But like you said, he's definitely still a threat. I mean, last time the Steelers played Josh Jacobs was Christmas Eve. I mean, I know you remember that game last season. 15 carries, 44 yards. And the conditions weren't exactly great either. But if they can keep him to at least, I mean, under 100, that's probably will be enough for the Steelers to pull out a win here.
I would think if they could hold them under 100, they should be able to find a way to win this game.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the golden number. If he gets going up over 150 and they're moving the ball, and Jimmy Garoppolo's not turning, throwing any interceptions or anything like that, that's the recipe where the Steelers could potentially lose. I mean, you also referenced that game last year against the Raiders. Pittsburgh still rushed for 106 yards total in that narrow victory. So,
yeah.
Again, get the ground game going. It'll be, it's in Vegas, so it'll be much more favorable conditions in this game. I mean, that's what the Steelers, got that's I need to see them get back to that identity, and I really need to see some progression on the defensive line as far as stopping the run.
Yeah, I will say this just to add, this is the Raiders' home opener. Their first two games have been on the road, and they've only had a combined 501 yards, which, I mean, that's 250 yards if we're doing the math. So
yeah.
Offensively, they're not doing great either.
Which
so
is
again,
a good sign for Pittsburgh.
Exactly, yeah. This is a time for the Steelers to capitalize, really.
Yeah. And again, this is also a Raiders team where coming into the season, I think a lot of people kind of had them in the bottom half of the league, not really, I think a lot of people might have had them under 500. So this is a game that, I don't want to say this is a get right game for Pittsburgh because it's on the road, Vegas home opener. But, like Pittsburgh, like you need to right the ship a little bit here. And it's certainly a game that they're capable of winning.
Yeah. And I think I read this earlier that the Steelers haven't won at the Raiders since 1995, which is kind of a crazy.
That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully they break it then.
Yeah. I mean, this may be their first game in Vegas. So, that's something to also keep in mind as well. So, we will have to wait until Sunday Night Football for this one. But how about the Eagles? They're taking on the Buccaneers. What are you looking for in this game?
Yeah, this is such an interesting game because the Bucs are a tough read. Like I know they have good players defensively. Baker Mayfield hasn't turned the ball over. He's looked like good. Mike Evans has been his favorite target, and I kind of looked into this a little bit in terms of the targets and the yardage. Mike Evans has had 18 targets, 14 receptions, 237 yards, 171 against the Bears. Chris Godwin has had 14 targets, 10 receptions, 109 yards. So them two alone is 72% of Baker Mayfield's passing yards. So you got to figure out how to limit them, and hopefully Bradbury's back. And I'm gonna guess, Godwin's gonna move around, probably in the slot and on the outside too. So really, it's gonna be the corner. That's the matchup I'm kind of looking at the most: the cornerbacks versus the receivers. Those are the two best players they have offensively. And I'm not really worried about the run game all that much, or at least the Bucs run game, because they haven't really been running it that well. Their offensive line has had some turnover. They've lost Donovan Smith. So potentially that could be a game for Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat to capitalize and really get after Baker Mayfield, who seems to be comfortable in the pocket and seems to look confident again. It's more, I think Evans and Godwin are the two players that I think the Eagles have to game plan around and hope that you can limit their production, because then I think you have the advantage and can really get after Baker Mayfield and make him uncomfortable.
It's also interesting because these, again, only 2 games, but these are the 2 teams that have been the best at defending the run game so far. And, obviously DeAndre Swift with the big game last week, and, the Buccaneers, even though, like you talked about, you key in on Godwin and Mike Evans, I still see Todd Bowles also wanting to, establish the ground game a bit. And again, Baker Mayfield, I think a big reason for their success is they haven't turned the ball over a lot. So they've been able to stay in games. So I think that's an interesting battle to kind of see of, if both of these defenses can kind of contain the run, which offense is going to be kind of able to pass the ball and move the ball through the air more. Yeah. And I think that, this is potentially, I'll take Jalen Hurts over Baker Mayfield any day of the week. That's not a question about that. It's just a matter of who can move the ball, and it may come down to which team also can hold on to the ball more. Turnovers may be a factor in this one.
Yeah, I think it will, because last time Jalen Hurts played against Todd Bowles, I mean, that was the 2021 wild card, and at that point, Todd Bowles was defensive coordinator. Hurts threw 2 interceptions, was sacked twice. Sacked twice. And again, that was before he became a star. But still, Todd Bowles is no pushover defensively. So it's going to be another tough one offensively. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of with you that I think that the Bucs defense is going to key in on the rushing attack, the run game. So it's going to have to come down to the passing game, and I really need Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, Brian Johnson to figure that out, because their defense has some good players: Levante David, Devin White, Carlton Davis. They have players and on all 3 levels really that are pretty good. So it's not going to be a pushover by any means. It's going to be tough. They're going to have to, I mean, just get it to your receivers quick. I mean, you're not going to be able to hold on to the ball very long like you did last week and get sacked again, because, like I said, they have good players. Vita Vea, what's his name? The defensive end. I forget his name. Like Shiyunk. Well, they have Shaq Bear.
Yeah. Are you talking about Logan? Are you talking about Logan Hall?
No. I know he's a decent player. He's the other edge rusher.
William Golston?
No, but he's also good. See, they have players that they have depth there too at the edge. I have him down here somewhere. Oh, Joe
Tryon.
Yeah.
Joe Tryon.
He's pretty good too. So you're not gonna have much time to hold on to it and hesitate. You got to make your decision. You got to be decisive, confident with your passes. So
I think another aspect that could potentially go in the Eagles' favor too is the fact that they did have that Thursday night game, so they have the extra couple of days to prepare and game plan for this one against the Bucs. So hopefully they can take advantage of that. Is there anything else you're kind of looking at? I mean, I know you referenced the defensive line getting after it. I mean, Tristan Wirfs is still there. I don't really, he's a former All-Pro. He made the transition to left tackle. I don't know how he's kind of held his own over there. Yeah. But he's a talented player on the offensive line, but potentially for the Eagles to get home to Baker Mayfield, they can take advantage of the other side of the offensive line, where I think it's Luke Gedeke who's playing at right tackle. So they
have an advantage, at least on the right side of the line. I've always loved Tristan Wirfs. He's a great player, but even coming out of college, I liked Wirfs. They also have the rookie Cody Mauch, who's the right guard. So I think you're right. Take advantage of that right side of the line of scrimmage when it comes to trying to put pressure on Mayfield. Yeah, let's hope that that's pretty much all I have. And get into a rhythm early, really, because there has been no rhythm whatsoever. There's been no. I said this last week too. I was like, give Jalen Hurts some easy completions to start off the game, and maybe he finds his groove. Maybe the offense moves the ball, but again, that wasn't really the case until they ran the ball. So you can't do that again. You can't start off slow. Is my point. So
one thing that I forgot to do with the Steelers, and we've kind of done this every week, so let's keep doing it, but. The line on the Eagles and Bucs game, the Monday night, I might add. I don't think we referenced it was on Monday night.
Right. Yeah.
So the Eagles are 5.5-point road favorites, and the over/under is set at 46. So what do you make of that line, and what's kind of your score prediction here?
So I have the Bucs covering. I mean, I don't think the Eagles should be favored by that much, really.
5.5 feels a little bit big.
It is. So I'm going to have the Bucs covering. I say the Eagles win 24-20.
I really like that score prediction, because I also think that the under is probably the better move on 46, and I don't really see the Eagles. You know what? I'll go. No, I really don't see them covering the spread either. That 5.5 line scares me. If it was 2.5, 3, I'd feel better about it. But 5.5 feels big.
That's too much.
You know what? I'll roll with I'll do 26-22. So the score that the Steelers just beat the Browns by. And
Okay.
I'll have the over actually hitting, but I still have the Bucks covering that spread. So
Fair.
then for the Steelers, I mean, this is the first time I'm looking at this line because the game was so recently.
Yeah.
The Steelers just played yesterday. I haven't even thought of, barely even thinking about next week. But the Raiders are favored by 1.5 at home, and the over/under set at 43. You know what? I'm gonna have the Steelers. I'm gonna have them going on the road and winning this game. And I'm going to have them also covering the spread, barely covering actually the spread's irrelevant because I have them winning. But
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to have them winning 20-18. Last year was a low scoring game. I think it's going to be kind of similar. I don't think you can bank on 2 defensive touchdowns again to kind of get the over to hit. So I'm going to go with 20-18 and the over does not hit.
I'm gonna go 23-20 Steelers win. And the
Okay.
over, wait, what was the over? 46?
The over is set at 43.
43. Okay, then I hit the over on that.
Okay. All right, man. So, I mean, week 3, we're chugging right along through the NFL season.
Yeah,
and
man.
and yeah, we will be back next week to break more of it down. So, any final thoughts from you before we close this thing out?
Let's just have clean games, man. Clean
Wouldn't it be
games.
nice if we could just come back and say, hey, you know what? Neither of these teams blew the other one out, but it was just a really clean game of football. They
Exactly.
executed their game plan, no missed tackles, and they got the road victories. I'd be really happy with that.
Yeah.
Holy cow! All right, let's let that be the theme of the week. Let's get some clean victories. Let's get some clean games. And let's close this episode out. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. Bye bye now.